Lydia, thank you so very much for joining us. I want to briefly introduce you. Lydia is a science journalist and the author of many popular science books, and most recently, the highly acclaimed book, Friendship, The Evolution, Biology, and Extraordinary Power of Life's Fundamental Bond. And especially today, I think your research, your knowledge, your messaging is vital for parents and educators to hear. And Lydia is also a contributor to The Atlantic, The New York Times, Newsweek, Time Magazine. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule now to answer a few questions.
Happy to do it.
My first question, and I have kids at home now too. I have a high schooler, middle schooler, and an elementary schooler. And socialization is definitely a concern right now. Why do children miss their friends so much?
Adolescence is really all about the social brain and about learning how to interact with friends. And so what's important for adults to recognize, first of all, is that from a neuroscience perspective, adolescence runs from the age of 10 to 25. And so during that whole time, kids' brains are continuing to develop in new ways. And one of the big things that's happening, and this might be somewhat familiar to people, but I'm not sure that they understand how it has to do with how kids feel about their social lives. What's happening is that the parts of the brain sort of right here that control executive function, judgment, and reason are continuing to develop, but at a steady, slow pace, kind of linearly, going up the pit like this. And the parts of the brain that are known as the limbic system that have to do with emotion and fear and threat and things like that, that is leaping up ahead. It's overtaking the parts of the brain that are about reason in this time. And that leads to a gap in development. And that gap, it makes kids so primed for emotion, right? And of course, they are getting reward signals from being with their friends. The mere presence of friends triggers the reward systems in their brain, and they want more of that. It also is why the pain of rejection feels worse when you're an adolescent. So both acceptance and rejection, you're super sensitive to that. You're just in the process of figuring out who you are in the social world and how you fit in. And you are, as I said, you are primed for the reward of being with friends. And so the pain of being without them is so real. And so even though adults are feeling the same thing, what they don't understand is that kids actually are feeling it more intensely in their brain. I mean, the signaling in their brain is operating in a way that is different from what's happening with you and me. I mean, I think it means that parents should put some effort into the virtual playdate if you can, and into even just a little allowing some FaceTime calls with their friends, or maybe a project with friends. I mean, one of the things for adults that's really useful to cope is to sort of set a plan, something that gives you a reason, a thing to move forward with every day. Sometimes that involves volunteering or something like that. And other times it's much more personal, but maybe kids can do that with their friends. Adults can do it with their friends, and kids can too.
So you brought up something that's interesting. So my daughter, who is in fourth grade, we set up a end of school day Zoom chat room for her, where she friends get on in a normal environment. I should say. A few months ago, I would never have condoned something like that.
There you go. Right.
And now it's almost this vital part of the day. And when the girls can't get access, they're all kind of freaking out with it,
Right. The time that kids are together in school is such an important part of their socializing, and we're not there, so we don't see it. And I think we don't always appreciate how critical it is. And the last thing I'll say on this is that, adults have been so upset about, before coronavirus, adults were so upset about the way kids interact virtually and on social media all the time. And I've heard people say, kids don't seem to know how to be friends in person. But the fact that they so want to be together in person right now kind of gives that the lie, I think. And it should be a reminder to us that they do care about being together in person, and that they cannot wait to get back to it.
So that leads to the second or the third question, I should say, which is,
right.
I think gaming, for many families, including for me, it's kind of a trigger point.
Yes.
And so now kids, and more than 50% of our public school students aren't engaged in any kind of learning. And
Right.
a lot of kids are playing video games. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, so there's two different things here. Video games should not be taking the place of learning, of course. So I can't condone that on any level. But the thing I think is really important for parents to understand is that video games are not they're not as bad as we have been led to believe, and that in fact they are a very, very social way for kids to interact. So 3/4 of the time, kids who are playing video games are playing with other kids. They are either in the room with them, I mean, not now unless it's a sibling, right? But they're in the room, or they're over the internet, or they're on their phones talking to each other while they play. And I'm not saying that they should be doing it all hours of the day, but I think that what we have a tendency to do, and I say this as someone who did it myself, is to see the video game and not the visceral connection that's happening between the kids when they're playing. And so right now, they really need whatever they can get as a way of connecting. So allowing a little bit of that in a day is just fine, as long as they are playing with other kids. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't allow some of it, even if they're playing alone too. But what I'm talking about is appreciating that there's a social aspect to it that most parents just don't see.
I'm definitely guilty of that. So thank you for sharing that. And another question I have is, so remote learning is definitely making a lot of parents look bad. It's a lot. And also depending on the circumstances in your family. Jim Gaffigan, I have to say, a comedian who with 5 children, put on this amazing little video on what it looks like in his home. And he has a lockbox and he puts the tech in the box at night. I mean, this could just be a skit, but all the kids are trying to break into it and they've only been successful a few times. And so I think you can bring out a lot of what we are kind of not hoping to be as parents. So what kind of advice would you have for parents?
However it is that you feel you're screwing up, is to be compassionate with yourself and with your kid, and to really recognize what unprecedented times these are and how difficult this can be. And, I hope that for most people, that's just the problem that I have, that I literally forgot. And, but we also are having the problem with as many people as we have here, and my work involving a whole lot of Zooming like this, that, sometimes we have technology problems too, and other people just plain don't have access. But so understanding just how hard this is critical. And I've been doing a lot of reporting and interviewing of mental health professionals talking about coping and resilience. And that's one of the things they say, is to sort of start by being kind to yourself and knowing that we are all doing the best that we can. Communicate with the teachers, but raise your hand when it was on you and not on your kid, so that your kid doesn't suffer. But also know that we are all, this is not, my kid's school made a point of saying, this is not meant to be school online exactly as it was. This is a different thing altogether. And we are all doing the best we can. And so just, be kind to yourself, forgive yourself a little bit, and then just try to do it better the next day.
Well, it brings up a point, I think, about compassion. And I think this is an opportunity for parents and children alike to show compassion towards one another in a way that we probably haven't had. And we are all stuck together. So
Yeah.
we have to find that silver lining.
I think modeling how to be resilient in odd situations is important. And then the compassion piece for yourself and for them, talking to them about that is really important.
I'd love to ask you one last question. And you,
okay.
Sure. Yeah, I think you may have answered it, but in this different time in all of our lives, maybe there's a message of optimism or something new that you've learned that maybe we haven't touched upon that you can share.
Well, I would just like to share, obviously, I've been thinking a lot about friendship, since that's what my most recent book is about. And I was talking about it before coronavirus really became such an urgent thing. But what has struck me is that friendship, one of the problems with friendship is that in some senses it was so familiar that we all felt that we knew it and we understood it and we appreciated it. And what my book is about is the fact that there is a biology and an evolution to friendship that we don't know about. There's some new science about just how critical our friends are. So friendship is as important as diet and exercise for your health. It affects how long you live. It affects your cardiovascular functioning, your immune system, all these really important things, cognitive health, mental health. And so there's that. And then there's also the fact that there's this evolutionary story, and that it's not just us, but other species too. There's been something of a survival of the friendliest at work. And so there's an evolutionary advantage to being kind and to being good at making strong, positive bonds. Now, what's happened with coronavirus is that what I used to complain about, that we weren't appreciating our friends enough, is no longer the case, right? You don't always appreciate what you have until it's gone. There have been hundreds of songs with those lyrics, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really true now, and this is thrown into sharp relief, just how critical that connection is. And it's striking how people are reaching out to friends they haven't seen in a long time. They're writing letters, they're doing things in different ways. And I think what that's about is that this is a moment where actually what it makes us think about is how important the connections are and the people who have meant something to us over the course of our lives. I think that's why we're reaching out to old friends. And I think that's lovely. And what I hope is that we don't go back to our old ways, that we use this moment to kind of think about just how important this stuff is, to prioritize our relationships. And then when we are able to see people in person, that we embrace each other, fall into each other's arms with joy after washing our hands, and that we don't cancel on our friends, and that we make them a priority, and that we model for our kids how important that is.
I love that, and to model that for our children too,
Yeah.
because we haven't had that opportunity before when we're so busy with our own work and personal lives and taking care of them. And
Right. And we deliver a lot of messages of achievement, which I'm all for. I push my kids to achieve, but I also think that we need to make clear that there are that the achieving as a friend, which means to be a good friend,
yeah,
is really important as well. And that given the health factors here, it's going to be one of the most important skills kids can have in their lifetime. And the last thing I'd say about it is, both for kids and for adults, this new science shouldn't make you feel that this is just one more thing to add to your to-do list. I like to think of it as permission to hang out with your friends and to know that you're doing something good for your health when you're doing it.
I love that. It's a perfect note to end on. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Sure. Thank you.